Hello again. As you know, I'm Eli the Computer Guy, and this is episode 341, Introduction to Using SQUID Web Proxy Servers. So SQUID Web Proxy Servers are so cool. Once you start using SQUID Web Proxy Servers, you will wonder why you have not been using them for the past decade. You will wonder why proxy servers went into the dustbin of history, and many people don't think about them anymore. Basically, what a proxy server is a proxy server is a server on your network that the other computers on your network connect to go out to the internet. So proxy servers were really big, very important back in the 1990s, because if you wanted to have multiple computers be able to get out onto the internet, they all had to go through a proxy server. Well, sometime way back when, it was like 12 years ago, 13 years ago, NAT started to be put into all routers. What NAT is NAT is something called network address translation. This means that individual computers and devices on the network can directly connect to the router and go out and speak to the internet. Now, without NAT, without network address translation, that is not possible, and that is why we used to use proxy servers. So if you wanted to use Internet Explorer, if you wanted 10 computers on a network to be able to use Internet Explorer to go out and browse the internet back in the 1990s, they all had to connect to your proxy server, and then the proxy server connected out to the internet. Basically, the proxy server is what routed all web traffic. Then, as I say, sometime around 1999, the early 2000 time frame, NAT, network address translation, was pushed out into mass consumption devices, and proxy servers went the way of the dodo, essentially. They were out there, but people really didn't use them a lot. Well, SQUID Proxy Server is simply an open source version of a proxy server that can be installed onto a Linux server. So this can be installed onto Ubuntu, this can be installed onto CentOS, so on and so forth. Now, what I have found is that with SQUID can be very, very, very functional in the modern world. So again, like I said, a lot of us old timers, we remember proxy servers from the way old days, and we were really happy to throw those darn things into the trash can. But what I have found in the modern world is that proxy servers can actually be very useful, and since basically you can install SQUID Proxy onto a Linux box, you can get a free SQUID server that can do a lot of functional things for you. So basically, you can just grab some old crappy computer that you have collecting dust, install Ubuntu onto it, install SQUID onto it, configure it, and it will be a nice proxy server. So the question that you're probably thinking, Eli, is like, well, okay, now you're saying SQUID or proxy servers were important 12 years ago. Then you're saying they weren't important. Now you're saying they are important. Well, why is that? Well, let's go over the whiteboard so I can show you and kind of explain to you why proxy servers are really useful nowadays. So the thing with proxy servers is the proxy server can do a number of different functions for your network, and in different classes I will show you these different functions. Today I would just show you how to install the SQUID proxy and how to connect to it and do one configuration, but in the future I will show you how to do more. So the overall idea of a SQUID proxy server is you have the proxy server here, and then all your computers that you want to get out to the internet will connect to that proxy server. That proxy server then connects to the router, which then connects to the internet. So all the web traffic is now going through this proxy server and out to the router. Now, if you're a smart technician, if you're a newbie, but if you're a smart technician, what you're thinking is, Eli, don't we want to make our systems as simple as possible? By adding a proxy server to the middle here, doesn't that make things more complicated or more prone to break? Why would we not just have all of these individual computers connect directly to a router and bypass something like a proxy server? Well, the reason is because the proxy server can give you a couple of nifty, neat features. The main feature it can give you is cache. Cache is phenomenal for the proxy server. So what happens is when one computer goes out onto the internet, and let's say this computer goes out and it downloads the latest version of Ubuntu. So you want to download a version, currently it's 12.04, right? And you want to download it to this computer. Well, the first time this computer goes out through the proxy, through the router, out to the internet, it's going to take you 30 minutes, let's say, to download that Ubuntu file to your computer. Why? Because it's grabbing it off the internet, and it will only be 30 minutes if you have a pretty good internet connection. It might be a lot longer if you have a crappy internet connection, right? Well, what happens when the second computer, computer number 2, wants to download Ubuntu? In a normal network configuration with NAT, what would happen is the second computer would go out to the internet, and it would also download the entire file, and that would take another 30 minutes. And if another computer wanted to download the exact same file, it would take another 30 minutes, so on and so forth. It would take up a lot of bandwidth, it would take a lot of time. It's just really tedious and horrible. Well, with a proxy server, with SQUID Proxy Server, you can configure a cache so that when computer number 1 downloads the Ubuntu operating system, it will be downloaded to their computer, but it will also be stored in cache on the proxy server. So the proxy server has its own hard drive, and you can configure the size of the cache, and whenever a computer going through the proxy server goes out to a website or downloads a file from the internet, that proxy server will cache it onto the hard drive. It will store it onto the hard drive. So that means the first computer, when it downloads Ubuntu operating system, will take 30 minutes. Well, then the second computer, when it goes to download Ubuntu, the proxy server will see it already has a local copy of the Ubuntu operating system, and so it will transfer it locally. What that means is you have no additional pull on your bandwidth. You're not using any internet connection because it's now a local transfer, and it will be really, really, really fast. So instead of going over an internet connection that might be 10 megabits per second, or if you're really lucky, 100 megabits per second, you can be transferring this data over your local area network at a gig per second. So the first thing that's really important and really freaking awesome about Squid is this cache. This is amazing. Kevin, one of my assistants, when I had the shop open the last time, he set up a SQUID Proxy Server, basically so that we could cache all of the Microsoft updates. So remember, our benches would have anywhere between 4 to 10 computers all doing updates at the exact same time, right? Well, if they're all connecting out to Microsoft.com and pulling the data in, that bogs up our internet connection and also takes a long time because they're all going out to the internet. They're all pulling in the exact same data, right? Well, since Kevin set up the proxy server, all of those updates got cached on the proxy server, and then the first computer to get updated, all of that information would get cached, but then the second computer would then just get the information from the proxy server. The third computer would get it from the proxy server. The fourth would from the proxy server. The fifth from the proxy server. So instead of pulling all that data down from the internet, it was all getting down from the proxy server, and it was freaking awesome. I am telling you, if you are still a poor schmuck that is still doing normal computer repair, still doing antivirus repair, still doing wipe and reloads, and still doing updates, setting up a SQUID proxy server, you will just think is the bee's knees. When you set this up and you configure it, you will be like, oh, what? It is so awesome. So basically the first thing is cache. It caches all that data onto its own hard drive. The next thing, if you're doing this locally, that's very important, is ACL, Access Control Lists. So again, when you're dealing with the business world, the question is what websites do you want your users to go to? Now, you as an employee, right? If you're an employee, you want to go to Facebook.com, and you want to go to Twitter.com, you want to go to Yahoo.com, you want to go to MoviePhone.com, and you want to go to all these wonderful websites, right? Because when you're at work, I mean, you still should be able to check your status updates. Well, obviously, as a boss, if I'm paying you money to be at work, I do not want you checking Facebook or Yahoo or MoviePhone.com. So what you can do is in the proxy server, you can create text files of ACL's access control lists that say where the web browsers or the connections can connect to. So you can say, I don't want people to go to facebook.com, and when somebody goes to facebook.com, that connection will get blocked. I don't want them to go to moviephone.com, and that will get blocked. One of the nice things with a SQUID proxy server is, again, this is all stored in a text file. So it's a lot easier to manage than some other solutions out there, such as like opendns.org, which is a very good way to block people from going to websites using DNS, but that can be a little harder, a little more complicated to configure. With SQUID Proxy, all of this is going to be stored in a text file, and so you can either create a script to update the text file, you can manually update it with something like Notepad or Vim. It's just a lot easier to use, less configuration. So the important thing, so from the security and the management standpoint of why you would want a SQUID proxy server is one, cache. Cache. This is phenomenal. Seriously, once you've got this cache set up, you're just not going to know how you live life any other way. And then from a business perspective, you then want ACLs, access control list. This allows you to block connections to websites or servers you don't want people to have access to. Now, the other way, the third way that Web Proxy Server, SQUID Proxy Server, is very useful for you is from the hacker perspective. Because the problem is let's say you're a computer, you're on this network, and let's say you're at college, right? And the issue is when you try to go out and you try to go to sex.com or you try to go to utorrent.com or you try to go to any of these websites, well, what happens? Most likely, especially if you're at college, they have some kind of web filter that blocks you from being able to access these websites, and therefore you can't get to them. Well, then you might be thinking, hey, Eli, I know I am going to use a web proxy server, something like proxify.com. But then when you try to connect to proxify.com, well, proxify.com is a well-known domain name, and so you find out that proxify.com also is blocked because they know about it. Well, here's the thing. If you're connecting to the internet, well, if you build a proxy server, and let's say you put it at your parents' house or your home, then what you can do is you can connect to your proxy server, and then your proxy server will go out and go to all the websites on the internet that you want to go to. So instead of you going to sex.com, you connect to your proxy server, it connects to sex.com. That information is sent to the proxy server, which is then sent to you, which means you bypass all of those web filters. So depending on what you're doing, this can be very nefarious or very normal. Again, if you're at college and you're looking at all these naughty sites, then this might be some kind of form of hacking to get around being able to go to those sites. From the security world, what I used to see in the real world with technicians is unfortunately a lot of corporate security would make connecting to a lot of websites that we needed to use too difficult. So the fact of the matter is, as real professionals, sometimes we need to be able to connect to torrent sites. Sometimes we need to be able to connect to things like Facebook in order to talk to our peers, in order to solve problems, which at the end of the day profits the business. Remember, when we're talking about business, it's always about making money for the business. So the problem is the corporate security guys would come in and they would put a blanket security policy across the corporation of you can't get to Facebook. Well, here's a problem. What if all of your IT buddies are on Facebook, and whenever you have a problem, you ping them on Facebook, and now Facebook is blocked? You're kind of screwed, right? So what I have had buddies do is they would set up the proxy server in their house. Then when they are at the company, they would connect their computer to their home proxy server, and then they would be able to go out and again to facebook.com, uTorrent, whatever, so on and so forth. So this is the idea of why proxy servers are important: for cache, for access control lists, and to be able to get around web filters that are set up on the network. Now, when you're using the proxy server, there are two ways to configure the proxy server. Again, today we're going to show you the first way. I'm going to make this fairly simple today. Today, we're going to be showing you the manual way of configuring your computers to use a proxy server with Internet Explorer. What this means is that the proxy server that you're going to be using, so you have a proxy server, it will have an IP address, 192.168.1.2. So that's the IP address of it today. It then has a port that it uses for the proxy service. As I recall, it's 3128 is the default port. So remember, with any networking service, there is always a port. HTTP is normally port 80. What we're using for this proxy server today is 3128. So what this means is we set up our proxy server. Then, on the computer that will be accessing the proxy server, we go into Internet Explorer and we manually input this information. So this is how you manually input the information. There's also something called a transparent proxy server. A transparent proxy server means that there is no configuration that the end user needs to do in order to touch that proxy server. Basically, the proxy server ends up being like the default gateway. If you plug the computer into the network, you will automatically be getting routed through the proxy server, and there's nothing else that you need to do. Again, today I'm keeping everything really simple, so we're not going to go into the transparent proxy. The other warning, what I will give you is once we do the class on the transparent proxy, is as I say with everything, all pieces of technology can be squirrely every once in a while. Every piece of technology can be a little bit quirky. Now remember, SQUID is doing all of this caching of information, so that means it stores information. So the question is what happens if you go to a website that regularly updates? Will the cache in the proxy server be refreshed? And so it is supposed to be refreshed. It is built so if there is a newer version on the server, that will automatically be downloaded and the end user will get that instead of the cache in the proxy. Again, things get squirrely, things get quirky. Sometimes that doesn't happen properly. So that would be my caution against using the transparent, the automatic proxy, because sometimes things can frankly just screw up. So today we're going to be showing you the manual. So we're going to go back to the computer now, and basically what I'm going to show you, again, very simply, is we're going to install, show you how to install SQUID onto an Ubuntu 12.04 server. Then I'm going to show you how to configure Internet Explorer in order to connect to that SQUID server, and then we are going to change one configuration within the SQUID configuration file in order for it to actually work, and that's all we're going to do today, and that will be the basic configuration for SQUID Proxy Server. Even with that basic configuration, it is still pretty nifty neat. The one warning that I will give you, again, when I am doing these classes, remember these are professional level classes. So you guys need to think sometimes. You need to think, right? As I talk about, one of the pains in the butt about Linux is different distributions and different versions of Linux do things slightly differently. So I am showing you this, I want to repeat, on Ubuntu 12.04. SQUID on Ubuntu 12.04 has to be configured in its own particular quirky little way. If you are using CentOS, if you are using Mint, if you are using some other distribution, you may have to go to Google to make sure what you're doing. Essentially, the overall concept of what you need to do today is you need to install SQUID, not too hard. You need to edit the squid.conf, the SQUID configuration file, and then you need to be able to restart the SQUID service. Those are the three tasks that you need to be able to do. Again, I will be showing you this on Ubuntu 12.04. If you're using a different distribution of Linux, it might be slightly different. All you have to do is go on to Google and say, how do I restart SQUID service on CentOS? And then follow the directions. But basically, so I just want to give you that, because I know some of you guys get all lost and then but it's really not that bad. So let's go over to the computer here, and I'll show you how all this stuff works. Okay, so we're back at my computer system now. So you understand what's going on. What I've done is I have this laptop computer here. You know, my trusty 4 gig of RAM laptops that I bought like 2 years ago for $400 a piece. Again, I love them. They're these little gateway pieces of crap that I bought at Best Buy, and they work great for basic test machines. So what I've done is I've installed, again, Ubuntu 12.04 server onto this laptop. Now to do the demonstration that I'm doing, I also installed SSH, Secure Shell, so that I can be on this computer and remotely control the server. So basically, if you're at this point in life and you're messing around with Linux, you should be able to know how to install Secure Shell and be able to use PuTTY. And if you don't, you got some bigger problems. So let's go over to the computer so I can show you what's going on. So this is the SQUID server. So I am using PuTTY to use SSH to connect to the SQUID server. So what you are going to do is when you get to the SQUID server, or the Linux server, you're going to say sudo superuser apt get install. If you know anything about Ubuntu, this should be very simple, and then squid. So sudo apt-get install squid. This is what will install squid for you. You do not need any additional packages. So it'll ask you for the password, and then it'll do all this, and basically what it will say, I've already had squid installed. If you did not have squid installed, it would say, do you want to install this? You would say yes. So basically that is all you have to do to install squid. It's just got to be connected to the internet. It has to have a real IP, it has to have an IP address, and then you do sudo apt-get install squid. Now once you have installed squid, you then need to go into the configuration file for squid. So with this, again, I use sudo, and then I use vim. So again, in the Linux world, everybody has their own favorite text editor. Again, it's kind of like out in the Windows world where everybody has their own favorite antivirus software that they like. I prefer Vim. It is installed by default on Ubuntu 12.04. So I do sudo vim etc / and here's one of the quirks with Ubuntu is it's squid 3. So etc / squid 3. If you read some of the instructions, they tell you etc / squid, but with Ubuntu it's squid 3, and then you do squid.conf. And now you can see that I am in the squid file. And I can scroll down and I can go in and I can start configuring things. Now you are going to see that there are a lot of configurations that can be done in Squid. Today we are only going to do a single configuration. I will warn you, when you look at the Squid configuration files, especially if you're new to them, it's going to seem overwhelming. Essentially with the Squid configuration file, they piled the man page and the configuration file and did a nasty mash into one obnoxiously long file. And so when you're looking at it, most of the configuration file is actually just text, just instructions on how to use Squid. There aren't nearly as many options as you may think, but the problem is it's such a long, nasty, horrible file that you've got to scroll through it. One of the things that I would suggest if you are new to Squid, and especially if you're new to anything in Linux, when you go to these configuration pages, don't feel sheepish about printing them out. Print them out to a laser printer, and then actually just sit there and read through all of them. Because especially if you don't know what you're looking for in the squid.conf file, there's a lot of stuff there. So in these classes, I'm going to show you what to look for. But once you start playing around, it really might be worth your effort just to print everything out so that you can see what's going on. So basically, we go back and we can see here that there's just a whole bunch of files. So what we need to do now is we need to actually allow the local computers to be able to access this Squid server. So by default, the Squid server is on, but local users can't access it. So what we can do is we can go over, and I am now going to be looking at Internet Explorer. So Internet Explorer currently is not going through the Squid server. So if I go to CNN.com, you can see I can go to CNN.com just fine. I can go to CNN.com, I can go to Google.com, and there are no issues. So what I want to do is I want to set this up so it will go through the SQUID Proxy Server. So to do that, I click on the little the little cog thing up there, and then I go to Internet Options. I then click on Internet Options. I then go to Connections. I then go down to LAN Settings. LAN Settings almost all the way at the bottom. This is where you can set the configuration information for the proxy server. So I can check the Use Proxy Server for your LAN box. I then put in the address. So I know the address of this SQUID proxy server is 192.168.1.2. So you put in whatever IP address your SQUID proxy server has. Then the port number. Again, you're going to be using whatever port is configured for the proxy. By default, the port number is 3128. You can change that, but that's something we will mess with in the future. So now I would say just leave it as is. So you put in the IP address, and you put in the port number, and you hit OK, and you hit OK. Then we will be on Google, and now that we're on Google, we can say, hey, I want to go back to CNN.com, right? And when I go back to CNN.com, oh no! Here, let me do the Home Alone thing. Oh no! What happened? I broke it. Well, the first thing, again, whenever you're doing Linux, whenever you're doing administration, make sure to read error codes. Error codes tell you a lot of things and will tell you where you're screwing up. So the following error was encountered while trying to retrieve access denied. Now that's a very important word there. It is telling you what the problem is. This is a security problem. Access is denied. It's not saying that the website can't be found. It's not saying any other errors. It's saying access is denied, which means you do not have permission to access that website. So if you don't have permission, then you need to change permissions, right? Well, the way you change permissions is by going into the squid.conf file. So now let's go back, and we are going to go back into our Linux, the SQUID server, and we are going to change the squid.conf file. So we are already here. Now I know what I need to change, so I am going to use the find command. So in Vim, in order to do a find, you do /, and then you type in what you're trying to find. So http:/access. So what I do is I hit enter, and it will look for http:/access. So all I need to hit is N as November, and it will start doing next. So next. And so, okay, so I'm getting closer. Next. Okay, HTTP access, allow manager, deny manager, deny. What I'm looking for is right here. http:/access, deny all. Deny all means to deny unless otherwise told not to deny. Again, whenever I do these basic classes, I am not using best security practices. I don't. I admit that. I'm trying to make this easy for you guys so that you can make this work. So what we are going to do is we are going to open up this proxy server so everybody on the LAN can use it. Possibly not the best security practice, but it will work. And frankly, if you've got a pretty secure network, who cares, really? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back, and we're at the HTTP access, deny all. I hit I is for insert. I then delete deny, and I put allow space. So now it's http:/access allow all, and then I hit escape. So we have now modified the deny all to allow all. So then I do :WQ. What this will do is this will save the file, and this will quit. So the important thing is http:/access space deny all to http:/access space allow all. Very, very important. Then you hit enter. So now it has been written, and now it has been saved. But again, as a professional, so you've changed the configuration file for a service on the server. What do you need to do next? You need to restart the service, because whenever the service starts, right, all the configuration information is loaded, and then generally the service doesn't go back and read the configuration information until it is restarted. So we're going to have to restart that service. So we're going to transition back. And again, depending on what version of Linux you're using, you may use a different command. For this version, for Ubuntu 12.04, I use sudo space service space SQUID3 space restart. So if you try to use any other way to restart the service, ini period d blah 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 restart, that won't work. This is the way you have to restart the service on Ubuntu 12.04, and then you hit enter. Of course, since you're restarting, it will take a second. So now we can see that it has restarted. So we change the configuration file, then we restart it. Now we go back to Internet Explorer, and then I can just hit refresh, and we can see that now CNN.com works properly. So now the proxy server is working. So this computer is now routing through the proxy server to go out to the internet. And that, why we go into Internet Explorer in order to change this configuration, is that is where the core configuration is stored. So it's stored there for Internet Explorer, and for Chrome, and for Windows updates, and for a lot of other things. So a lot of people say, Eli, I only use Chrome. Why would I be going into Internet Explorer? Well, the reason is because that's where those settings are stored. Chrome uses those settings by default. You can put an extension or something and change that, but generally it's used by default. So that is all you need to do to install and get a SQUID proxy server running. These are the absolute default base configurations. It is caching a little bit of data, but it's not very much. I think by default it will only cache files up to 4 megabytes in size. But even if you have an office of 10 or 20 people, simply using a SQUID proxy server with default settings, I am going to tell you, it will make things seem like they're running a lot faster. Because all of those little files, instead of each computer having to go out to the internet to access them, they're able to grab them off of that proxy server. So again, even on a small network, it will make things run pretty well. Again, if you're going to be building something like a SQUID proxy server for yourself, for the production environment, you should be thinking about what's important for a SQUID proxy server. What I will tell you is the most important thing for a SQUID proxy server is the hard drive speed. How fast data can be written to the hard drive and pulled off the hard drive. RAM and the CPU are not as important. So if you're thinking about creating your own SQUID proxy server, if you have the budget, I would definitely be telling you to take a look at buying a solid state hard drive for it, because that is what will be the best for you. So that's all there is to the SQUID proxy server. Again, why SQUID proxy servers are good now is especially in workshop environments. If you are still a poor schmuck doing computer repair, doing wipes and reloads, doing hours and hours and hours of updates, imagine if you could download all of those 5 gigs of Microsoft updates, not from Microsoft.com, but from a local server. And Windows Update will still work how it's supposed to work. Wouldn't that be useful? Wouldn't that be great? I'm telling you, we had this running in my old shop. It was beautiful. If I was gay, I would have kissed Kevin. I mean, it was just so amazingly great. So the caching is what I think is the most important thing. The access control lists are awesome if you are dealing with small business clients or organizations using a proxy server to block traffic to things like Facebook.com and Yahoo.com. Believe me, the employees may not like you, but the boss will, and they're the ones who write the check. And then finally, whether it's for security or whether it's for hacking, you can set up your own proxy server at your own house or at your mama or papa's house, right? You can set up port forwarding in the router, and then what you can do is you can be anywhere in the world, you can connect to the proxy server, and then that proxy server will connect out to the internet, and then you can go to sex.com or utorrent.com or I don't know, wherever site you want to go to, and it should work and it won't be blocked by the web filters. So yeah, that's what it is. So this was episode 341, Intro to Using SQUID Web Proxy Server. My final note, again, Every version of Linux does this slightly differently. Again, if you haven't caught it yet, I used Ubuntu 12.04 server version in order to do this. If you decide to use something else, all you have to do is you have to install it, you have to modify the config file, and you have to restart the service. Again, do a little bit of Google searching, and I believe in you. You can figure it out. It's really not that hard. There will be more classes in the SQUID series. I'm going to show you how to create a caching server. I'm going to show you how to do the access control lists, and I'm going to show you how to do the transparent, so you can just set this up and then not have to do any configurations. But those will be different classes, since I want to try to keep this simple, since especially in Linux world, it's really easy to get confused really quick. So I am Eli the Computer Guy. I enjoy teaching this class, and look forward to seeing you at the next one.